March 14, 2024. Maplewood, Virginia. A residential security camera mounted high on the back of a quiet home activates automatically the moment it detects movement. It records exactly 31 seconds. No sound, no warning, just a fixed, silent view of a stone patio. An elderly man with white hair sits in a wheelchair near the center of the frame. His back is slightly hunched. His hands rest loosely on the armrests. He isn't looking at the camera. He doesn't know it's recording. He's focused entirely on the woman stepping out through the back door. She is 35 years old. She's still wearing navy blue work scrubs. Her badge is clipped at her waist, the kind worn by medical professionals who expect to be back on the job the next morning. She walks toward him without hesitation, without checking her phone, without looking around. She bends down. She places one hand gently on the armrest of the wheelchair. Then she kisses him on the mouth. It isn't quick. It isn't awkward. It isn't a mistake. The camera captures 4 full seconds of contact. Long enough that there's no confusion about what this is. Long enough that anyone watching later will understand immediately what they're seeing. The man lifts his hand and touches her cheek. His fingers linger there. She smiles at him, close enough that the camera catches the expression even from a distance. For a brief moment, the rest of the world doesn't exist. Then she stands, moves behind the wheelchair, places her hands on the handles, and gently pushes him back toward the house. At exactly 6:35 p.m., both of them disappear from the camera's view. That footage will later be paused, replayed, slowed down, and examined frame by detectives, attorneys, and jurors. It will be described in court, debated, interpreted, weaponized. But at the moment it's recorded, it's just 2 people on a patio. And it is the last confirmed time she is ever seen alive. 11 days later, at 6:47 in the morning, the Maplewood Police Department receives a phone call. The caller is a man. His voice is calm, measured, almost rehearsed. He doesn't give his name. He doesn't explain how he knows what he knows. He doesn't stay on the line. He delivers a single sentence. Riverside Warehouse. Unit 4B. There's a body. Then the call disconnects. Dispatch attempts to trace it. The line is already dead. Officers arrive at the warehouse within minutes. The building has been abandoned for nearly 3 years. No active leases. No employees. No surveillance cameras. Rust stains run down the metal doors. The air smells stale before they even step inside. Unit 4B is secured from the outside. A heavy lock. No signs of forced entry. They break it open. Inside, in a small back room with no windows, they find a woman lying on the concrete floor. Her hands are zip-tied behind her back. There are visible marks around her neck. Her body position tells them she didn't go quietly. She is still wearing the same navy scrubs seen in the security footage. Investigators estimate she has been dead for 11 days. At first glance, it looks like a random abduction. A wrong place, wrong time crime. A vulnerable woman taken by chance. But that theory doesn't survive long. Because nothing about this scene is careless. The location is controlled. The timing is precise. The restraint method is deliberate. And the anonymous phone call didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone who knew exactly where she was. This wasn't random. This was calculated. This was about money. Millions of dollars. A rewritten will. And a family that decided murder was cheaper than losing what they believed already belonged to them. Her name was Joyce Krone. And the man in the wheelchair was worth more alive than she ever was. To understand why Joyce Krone was killed, detectives had to go back years. Long before the warehouse. Long before the money. Back to the moment a powerful man became dependent on others. 5 years earlier, the man in the wheelchair survived a violent car accident. A pickup truck ran a red light and hit his vehicle at full speed. The impact shattered his spine. Doctors saved his life, but not his mobility. From the waist down, nothing ever returned. Overnight, everything changed. He had been independent, wealthy, used to making decisions and being listened to. After the accident, he needed help with basic tasks. Dressing, moving, eating. He went from controlling his world to waiting for others to show up. At first, his family did show up. Phone calls came regularly. Visits were frequent. There were promises, assurances. They told him they were there for him, that nothing would change. But as weeks turned into months, the visits became shorter, then less frequent. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Phone records later showed long stretches with no incoming calls. Holidays passed with no visitors. Birthdays came and went without messages. He spent entire days alone, staring at the same walls, listening to the same silence. Investigators later recovered a journal he kept during that period. One entry, written months after the accident, stood out. "My family vanished the moment I became a burden. I was only valuable when I could still write checks." That loneliness mattered, because it created space. Space for someone else to enter his life. Joyce Krone was hired through a professional home health agency. She wasn't new. She wasn't inexperienced. She had near-perfect reviews. Dozens of families had trusted her with their parents, their spouses, their loved ones. The agency didn't send her out of sympathy. They sent her because she was their best. On her first day, she found him sitting alone in his wheelchair by a large window. He didn't turn when she entered, didn't greet her, didn't ask who she was. He had already decided people were temporary. Joyce noticed immediately. Instead of starting with instructions or medical questions, she asked him something no one else had asked in a long time. "What's your favorite meal?" she said. "The one you'd make if you could still stand in a kitchen." The question caught him off guard. It wasn't about medication, or limitations, or what he needed help with. It was about what he wanted. 2 days later, Joyce returned with grocery bags. She rearranged the kitchen so everything was within reach from his wheelchair. She let him help. Let him feel useful. Let him participate. When they sat down to eat together, he cried. It was the first time since the accident that he felt like a person again instead of a problem. Over the next few years, Joyce did far more than her job required. She learned what music he loved and brought records from her own collection. She sat with him during physical therapy. Read poetry aloud. Took him to parks, small cafes, places where strangers looked him in the eyes instead of at his chair. Slowly, the man in the wheelchair began to change. He smiled more. Laughed occasionally. Started planning small outings. Started caring about mornings again. And slowly, without either of them planning it, something else formed. At first, he didn't allow himself to acknowledge it. The age difference alone made it feel impossible. Inappropriate. Something he shouldn't even think about. But affection turned into attachment. Attachment turned into love. And eventually Joyce felt it too. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moment. No sudden confession. Just quiet changes that only two people sharing the same space every day would notice. He started waiting for her footsteps in the morning. She started lingering a little longer before leaving. And neither of them understood yet how dangerous that connection would become. By the second year, their routine had become fixed. Predictable in a way that felt safe. Breakfast at 8 every morning. Therapy sessions in the late morning. Long conversations in the afternoon that wandered from memories to music to things neither of them had ever said out loud to anyone else. Joyce began noticing the small things. The way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he straightened slightly in his wheelchair when she entered the room, as if her presence alone made him feel more upright, more alive. He noticed things too. How she lingered before leaving. How she always found an excuse to sit down for just a few more minutes. How silence between them stopped feeling awkward and started feeling heavy with meaning. One evening, after months of carrying the thought alone, he finally asked the question that had been sitting in his chest. "Why waste your time with a broken old man?" Joyce didn't pause. Didn't look away. Didn't soften the answer to spare his feelings. "You're not broken," she said. "You're just waiting for someone to remind you that you're still here." That was the moment he understood the feeling wasn't going away. He told himself it was wrong. The age difference. The optics. What people would think if they ever found out. What his family would say. What her coworkers might assume. But logic didn't touch what he felt. And by the time he finally worked up the courage to say it out loud, There was no pretending left. When he told her he loved her, Joyce didn't respond. She stood up, collected her things, left without explanation. That night he barely slept. He replayed the moment again and again, convinced he had crossed a line he could never uncross. That he had ruined the one relationship that made his life feel whole again. But the next morning, Joyce arrived as usual. She walked straight toward his wheelchair, knelt down in front of him, looked him directly in the eye. "I don't care how old you are," she said. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I love you too." From that moment on, everything changed. They didn't make a grand announcement. They didn't tell anyone. Not because they were ashamed, but because they understood exactly how it would look to people who didn't see what they saw every day. Especially his family. That instinct turned out to be right. Because the first time his son walked in unannounced and saw them together, the reaction wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern. It was rage. His father wasn't supposed to be happy. And Joyce wasn't supposed to matter. The confrontation happened without warning. His son hadn't visited in months. Phone records later showed the visit wasn't driven by concern at all. Days earlier, he had contacted his accountant asking about accessing his inheritance early. He was short on cash. Desperate. When he walked through the door and saw them together, he froze. His father wasn't being attended to. He wasn't being managed. He was sitting close to Joyce, laughing, holding her hand. Not patient and aide. A couple. The anger came fast and loud. "She's taking advantage of you." The accusation wasn't subtle. It wasn't protective. It was territorial. His father snapped back harder than anyone had heard in years. "Where were you when I was alone?" he demanded. "Where were you when I couldn't get out of bed? When the house was silent? She was the only one who showed up." The words landed harder than the accusation ever could. The argument ended the same way it began. Loud voices. No resolution. A door slammed so hard it rattled the frame. But it didn't end there. That same night, phone records later showed multiple calls placed in quick succession. One to a sister. One to a son. One unanswered call followed by a text marked urgent. An emergency meeting was set. What the family saw wasn't love. It was a threat. Within days, they returned together. United. Calm on the surface. Framing everything as concern. They suggested Joyce should be fired. That boundaries had been crossed. That their father wasn't thinking clearly. That he was being manipulated. He listened. Then he told them to leave. That was the moment the tone changed. The concern disappeared. Replaced by suspicion. Then hostility. Private investigators were hired quietly. Joyce's background was combed through in detail. Financial records. Education history. Employment files. Credit checks. Everything that could be weaponized. Nothing surfaced. She was clean. Lawyers were consulted next. Could the will be challenged? Could mental competency be questioned? Doctors reviewed years of medical records. Cognitive evaluations. Neurological assessments. The conclusion was unanimous. He was fully lucid. There were no legal weaknesses. No loopholes. No leverage. Every professional avenue failed. And that's when he made a decision he believed would protect Joyce. He rewrote his will. The numbers mattered. Millions of dollars were redirected. Assets reassigned. Accounts restructured. The house included. Everything documented. Everything deliberate. And one final clause was added. If any family member was convicted of a crime against Joyce, their inheritance would be void. He signed it. Legally airtight. What he didn't know was that the information wouldn't stay private. The leak happened quietly. An assistant at the law office saw the updated documents. Recognized the names. Understood the consequences. Made a phone call she should never have made. Within hours, the family knew everything. The amount. The house. The clause. Panic set in immediately. This wasn't a minor adjustment. This wasn't a warning. This was total displacement. Years of expectation erased with a single signature. That night they met again. Voices were raised. Numbers were repeated again and again. How much was gone? What it would cost them long-term? Mortgages. Investments. Debts they had planned to cover with money they no longer controlled. Challenging the will would take years. Court fees alone would be enormous. Legal risk was high. And there was no guarantee they would win. Silence settled over the room. Then someone finally said it out loud. If Joyce never lived to collect, the money reverted. The room went quiet. No one spoke at first. Not because they were shocked, but because they were calculating. Text messages later recovered by police showed hesitation in the beginning. Short replies. Questions. Doubt creeping in. Someone asking if this was really necessary. Someone else warning about consequences. Then the tone changed. Moral language disappeared, replaced by practical language. Who could handle it? How it would be done? What it would cost? Military contacts were discussed. Names passed quietly. Men known for solving problems without asking questions. Without creating complications. A price was set. $50,000 in cash. Half up front. Half after. Bank withdrawals followed within days. Large amounts taken out carefully. Structured. No electronic transfers. No obvious pattern beyond timestamps that would only matter later. Surveillance began immediately. Joyce's routine was predictable. Same arrival time each morning. Same car. Same route home. Same grocery stop after work. She lived a life built on consistency, never imagining it could be used against her. They didn't rush. They watched. They took notes. Counted minutes. Learned where she parked. Learned when she was alone. Learned when no one paid attention. This wasn't emotional. It was logistical. March 14th arrived quietly. Joyce didn't know it was her last day. She didn't know a ring had been purchased and hidden away. She didn't know two men had been sitting 3 blocks away for days, waiting for a signal. At 6:34 p.m., the camera recorded the kiss. At 6:47 p.m., she walked out the door. 13 minutes later, she drove into a parking lot she'd used dozens of times before. A place she considered routine. Familiar. And that was the last decision she ever made. The parking lot was nearly empty. Early evening. Just enough daylight left to make everything feel normal. Quiet enough that no one would think to look twice. Joyce parked near the back, popped the trunk and reached for her bags. That's when the van pulled in behind her. Close. Blocking her in. 2 men stepped out. One grabbed her from behind. She screamed. Fought. Tried to twist free. But the difference in strength made it brief. Zip ties tightened around her wrists. A hand covered her mouth. Less than 30 seconds from first contact to silence. A store employee heard something. Looked up. Saw a white van leaving the lot quickly. It registered as strange. Not dangerous. No call was made. Joyce's car sat exactly where she left it. Trunk open. Driver's door ajar. Purse on the ground. Groceries scattered across the pavement. No one noticed for 40 minutes. By the time police were called, Joyce had already been gone for 46 minutes. And by then, the plan was already complete. She was taken to a warehouse the family controlled. A property that had been vacant for years. No tenants. No security staff. No surveillance cameras. A place no one checked and no one missed. The vehicle stopped at the rear entrance. Out of sight from the road. They moved quickly, but not carelessly. Joyce was dragged inside, through a narrow corridor, into a small room at the back of the building. No windows. One door. The door was locked from the outside. Inside, the men didn't rush. Investigators would later describe what happened next as deliberate cruelty, not panic, not impulse. Joyce was restrained. She was conscious. And she was told exactly why she was there. She was told she had become too expensive. That her relationship wasn't love. It was a financial problem. That her presence had changed numbers on paper. That she stood between a family and millions of dollars they believed already belonged to them. They told her it wasn't personal. They told her it was business. 47 minutes after she was taken from the parking lot, Joyce Krone was killed. Her body was left on the concrete floor. The room was sealed. The door locked. The van driven away without urgency. 2 hours later, a second payment was delivered. Cash, packed into a duffel bag. No questions asked. No receipts. No discussion. That night, the people who ordered it went home. They ate dinner. Talked about ordinary things. Asked their spouses about their day. Watched television. Went to bed. And they slept. Police didn't find Joyce that night. Or the next. Or the next week. What they found instead was absence. Her car, still sitting where she left it. Unlocked. Keys inside. Phone untouched. Wallet still there. No ransom demand. No messages. No indication she left willingly. Within hours, alerts were issued. Interviews began. Flyers were printed. Search teams were deployed across neighborhoods, highways, and nearby wooded areas. Time passed with no answers. And every hour that passed reduced the chances of finding her alive. The man in the wheelchair was interviewed that same night. Detectives arrived at his home hours after Joyce vanished. He was still waiting for her to call. Still checking his phone. Still convinced there had been some simple explanation. A delay. A missed message. He told detectives everything. The relationship. How it started. How long it had lasted. The family's anger. The accusations. The arguments that ended with slammed doors. The rewritten will. The clause meant to protect Joyce. He didn't hide a single detail. He had nothing to protect anymore. The family was brought in the next morning. Each interview was separate. Each story delivered calmly. Each denial firm. None of them admitted involvement. Their alibis appeared clean. One had been home all evening. One was confirmed at work. One claimed a business dinner across town. Credit card receipts backed it up. Phone pings aligned. No physical evidence placed any of them near Joyce after she left the house. At that point, investigators had suspicion. But suspicion wasn't enough. Days passed. Then a week. No body. No ransom demand. No contact. No mistakes. Publicly, the case was treated as a missing person investigation. Privately, detectives feared the worst. The longer Joyce was gone, the smaller the chances became. Inside the house, time stopped. The man in the wheelchair stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. He positioned himself facing the front door every night, waiting. Listening. Hoping for footsteps that never came. On the 11th morning, the phone rang. Same calm voice. Same warehouse. Same unit. When detectives forced the door open, everything changed. Because the warehouse wasn't random. Property records showed it belonged to a management company. That company belonged to the family. It had been vacant for years. No tenants. No activity. But keys existed. Access existed. And now, motive already existed. From that moment forward, the case stopped being a disappearance and became a murder investigation aimed directly at the people who had the most to lose. That was the moment the case cracked open. If you're following this case so far, subscribe to this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who watches true crime, and comment which country you're watching from. From there, the investigation moved fast. Detectives began pulling everything connected to the family. Phone records, bank statements, property access logs, rental histories, anything that could explain how Joyce disappeared without a trace. What they found wasn't sloppy. It was calculated. Phone records showed repeated calls to the same number in the days leading up to Joyce's disappearance. Not long conversations. 8 minutes at most. Long enough to arrange logistics. Short enough to avoid drawing attention. Bank records revealed 2 significant cash withdrawals. One taken out days before Joyce vanished. Another just hours before the warehouse call. No explanations attached. No electronic transfers. No obvious reason other than timing. The amounts mattered. Enough money to hire professionals. Enough to make someone disappear quickly. Enough to believe it could all be kept quiet. Rental records filled in the remaining gaps. A van was rented under false identification. Picked up shortly before Joyce was taken. Returned days later. Clean. But not clean enough. Forensics found fibers consistent with the zip ties used on Joyce's wrists. Traces of her DNA inside the vehicle. Security footage from the rental location showed the same 2 men entering and exiting the van. Both had military backgrounds. Both had been discharged. Both had prior assault charges. Men with experience following orders. Men who knew how to work without witnesses. Investigators pulled their histories and found something else. Connections. They had served with one of the family members years earlier. Same unit. Same timeline. Same training. Familiar enough to be trusted with a job like this. Text messages recovered from deleted threads confirmed what detectives already suspected. A message sent minutes before Joyce left the house. Target leaving now. Everything pointed back to the same place. The money. Arrests followed quickly. At first, everyone pleaded not guilty. Calm faces. Controlled statements. Attorneys insisting the case was circumstantial. For a while, the story held. Until it didn't. Because pressure does what time alone cannot. And eventually, one of them broke. Faced with life in prison, one family member chose cooperation over loyalty. The pressure mounted quickly. Charges stacked. Evidence tightened. The possibility of never leaving prison became real. And when that reality set in, loyalty collapsed. He testified to everything. The planning. The meetings. The money. The surveillance. The text message sent minutes before Joyce left the house. He described the moment he delivered the second payment. How his hands shook as he handed over the bag. How he asked the question he already knew the answer to. Is it done? And how the response came without hesitation. She's gone. The trial lasted weeks. Jurors watched the same security footage again and again. 31 seconds. A kiss. A wheelchair. Two people unaware they were being recorded for history. Each replay stripped away another layer of doubt. This wasn't manipulation. This was love. The verdicts were unanimous. Life sentences. Decades behind bars. No appeals that mattered. But the final blow came after the courtroom emptied. The man in the wheelchair never recovered from Joyce's death. Not after the arrests. Not after the trial. Not even after the guilty verdicts. He stopped speaking. Stopped responding. Hospice nurses said he sat facing the same wall every night, motionless, as if waiting for something that would never come back through the door. On the day sentencing was finalized, his heart gave out. His final words were recorded. I waited my whole life to be loved. And my family took it away in 31 seconds. The will was executed shortly after. Because Joyce died first, her inheritance could not be collected. But because the family had been convicted of crimes against her, the clause activated exactly as written. They received nothing. Not the house. Not the accounts. Not a single dollar. Every asset was liquidated. Every cent redirected to charity. They killed for money. And lost it all. But the case didn't end when the sentences were handed down. Because one statement from the investigation still lingered. During one interrogation, a detective asked a question that never made it into the headlines. Have you done this kind of work before? Families hiring you? The man smiled before his attorney shut the interview down. You'd be surprised how often families kill for inheritance. That sentence never went anywhere. No follow-up questions. No additional investigation. No broader inquiry into how often money turns blood into motive. Just silence. And that silence is what makes this case unsettling. Because Joyce did nothing wrong. Her records were spotless. Her work history was flawless. Her boundaries were professional for years, until trust earned slowly over time became something deeper. Multiple doctors confirmed the man she cared for was fully lucid. There was no coercion. No manipulation. The will wasn't a scheme. It was gratitude. What killed Joyce wasn't greed alone. It was entitlement. To the family, the money already belonged to them. Not because they were present. Not because they cared. But because they shared blood. When love changed the numbers on paper, they didn't argue the math. They removed the variable. March 14th, 6:34 p.m. Joyce kissed the man she loved on a quiet patio. She didn't know two killers were waiting 3 blocks away. She didn't know her license plate had already been sent. She didn't know her schedule had already been mapped. She had 24 minutes of freedom left. 31 seconds later, she went inside. 13 minutes later, she walked out. 11 minutes after that, she was taken. 47 minutes after that, she was dead. If you work in healthcare, especially home care, this case matters. Document everything. Every accusation. Every hostile interaction. Every sudden family visit. Create a paper trail. Vary your routines. Trust your instincts. Joyce felt something was wrong. She assumed it would pass. It didn't. She deserved better. He deserved better. And the camera that recorded 31 seconds of love became the only witness that ever told the full truth. If this story held your attention, subscribe to this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who watches true crime, and comment which country you're watching from. Because some crimes don't start with violence. They start with a signature.